Hi everyone. In this video, I'll be showing you how to create synthetic data using ChatGPT. Now, there are a lot of use cases for creating synthetic data. Let us say you want to share some confidential data with an external stakeholder and you don't have access to the actual data. Maybe before doing the final survey, you want to get a sense of what the final data looks like. In that case, you can create synthetic data. Maybe you have a few data points with you, but you want to extrapolate and get more. Or maybe for a machine learning model, you want to do data augmentation by creating additional data points. So, a number of use cases where it would be very handy for you to be able to create synthetic data. So, we're going to use ChatGPT for this. And we will say create a synthetic data. Now you can specify the number of rows and columns. So I will say related to HR performance and potential talent tracker. We can also mention the client and the location. So we will say this is for SBI Bank in Gujarat region. Now either you tell it which columns you want, otherwise you can let it decide on its own. So I'm going to tell it 15 columns and 1,000 rows. And we want to save it as a CSV. As you can see, it writes the Python code for you. Now, I'm not going to walk you through the code. It's not really required, but just broadly, we are importing two libraries, pandas and numpy. Then we are creating a random seed, number of rows. After that, it is going column by column. And as you can see, because I mentioned Gujarat, this is the AI part of it, not the Python part of it. The AI part of it is smart enough to figure out what would be the locations within Gujarat that we want to capture. Then we have a random choice of department, which again is related to the BFSI sector. And once it does everything, it creates a data frame for you. You can also see that attrition risk is low, medium, high. My salary is between 3 lakhs and 20 lakhs. Of course, you can change those numbers as required. We'll click on it. And as you can see, we get a synthetic data. Of course, by writing a slightly more detailed prompt, you can get even better results that are more alike the real datasets that you have. But otherwise, the feature is very straightforward. Do remember that in many cases, you might not want to give absolutely correct data. For example, in reality, data is always a little unclear. After all, that is what the entire book and this entire course is about. So imagine you want to introduce some errors in it. Now that means I can go back and I can tell it, thanks, can you introduce some errors about 10% of the total values so that it resembles a real data set which would typically have errors in it. As you can see now, 10% of total values will have errors in it. In the meantime, let me also open Google Colab. We'll create a new notebook. Even though in the folder that has been shared with you, you will notice that you already have the Python notebooks and the generate synthetic HR data code has already been given to you. Do keep in mind that every time you run or rather write the code on ChatGPT, there will be variations, right? Because of randomness. As you can see, this is the new one. And even at one glance, you can see that it is introducing errors, not a number, 999, and error like this. And if I show you the file, you can see clearly that there are errors in the data, which in this case is a good thing. Okay, now I'm going to ask it, thanks, let us go back to the first code without errors. We want to modify it so that it runs on Google Colab. There would not be much difference, but it's just that when you run it in Google Colab versus the ChatGPT environment, there are a few small differences. For example, in ChatGPT, we haven't, uploaded any file. But in Google Colab, when we upload a file, we have to write that line of code. That would be better explained in a different example because this time we created a sample data. Let me try to give you a better one. So in ChatGPT, there are certain views that you get. For example, here it shows you that there is a link and you can download the file. This necessarily might not appear in Google Colab because the environment is different. So while the Python code is the same, the support of Python libraries might not be consistent. So do keep that in mind. So we ask it to do it for Google Colab. And if you notice, this time there is a from Google Colab import drive. And as you can see, we will copy it, come back, paste the code and run it. Remember, the first time you run the code, it has to connect, so it takes a few seconds. Now here, if you notice, it is asking me to connect to Google Drive. Now, I can do it if I want to, but here I'm going to ask it, why do I have to connect to Google Drive? So I can always ask this question, why is this required? Now, even though it tells you that, hey, this will be saved in Google Drive, we want to tell it, why is this required? Or we can even tell it, do not save on Google Drive, download directly. So that sync is not required. As you can see, it is rewriting the code for us. Perfect. Copy, come back, paste it, run it. And as you can see, it has downloaded the file. Here we go.